You will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farrow.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer has said a £29 billion plan to freeze energy bills is his party's answer to soaring living costs. Labour says it'd be paid for in part by extending the windfall tax on oil and gas firms. Sir Keir says families wouldn't have to pay a penny more than their current energy bills over the winter. The Institute for Fiscal Studies calls the plans an illusion, but the Labour leader claims the measures would cut inflation by up to 4%.
I think in a national emergency like this, where we've got so many families anxious about paying the bills, it's right politically that we say every penny should go to reducing those bills, not to compensating shareholders. What I wanted to make sure was that today we could put a fully costed, credible plan on the table which actually answers the question, what will you do to help so many struggling households this winter?
The UK has become the first country to approve a COVID vaccine that targets both the Omicron and original strain of the virus. The government says the upgraded Moderna vaccine has been carefully reviewed by its scientific advisory body. All adults will be offered the booster from September. Health Secretary Steve Barclay says the jab will help protect communities.
It's a hugely positive step. The UK is the first place to licence this through the MHRA. It means that UK patients will have access to the broader immunity that the bivalent vaccine offers. So it's an exciting potential and it's good news for the UK population.
GB News has learned the Ministry of Defence will stop controlling migrant operations in the English Channel early next year. The Royal Navy took over command and control functions in April as part of a plan to deal with the growing number of small boats crossing the waters. More than 20,000 migrants have entered the Channel so far this year, with government figures showing 607 crossings were made on Saturday. Heathrow Airport has announced it will extend its cap on passenger numbers until the end of summer. The airport says a daily limit of 100,000 departing travellers will now apply until October 29th. Heathrow says the cap could be lifted earlier, though, if it can improve its current labour shortage. And severe storms have hit the UK tonight following weeks of hot, dry weather. Heavy rain has flooded streets in Devon and Cornwall, disrupting travel and bringing with it the risk of power cuts. The Met Office has already issued a yellow thunderstorm warning for most of the UK. The alert will stay in place for southern England until Wednesday. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News Now. It's time for Headliners.
Hello, I'm Andrew Doyle, and welcome to Headliners, your nightly perusal through the next day's news. And tonight, we have two brilliant comedians who are nonetheless quite thin-skinned, so I must be careful what I say tonight. It's the idiotic Josh Howie and the simple-minded Nick Dixon. Just thought I'd give that a go. Battle of the Beards tonight. Look at you both.
Trimmed.
Looking very, very elegant. Let's take a look at tomorrow's front pages. We're going to start with the Daily Mail. They lead with air chaos to hit half-term, as up to 1 million travellers could now face flight cancellations as Heathrow extends daily passenger cap to end of October. Not good news if you're going on a holiday. The Telegraph runs with Royal Navy backs out of migrant patrols. We're going to be talking about that in just a wee while. And affluent A-level pupils least likely to have offers of university place. The Guardian next. Job cuts on the cheap. Ministers accused as civil servants face sack. And dual-strain COVID jab approved for boosters. We move on to the Financial Times, which leads with China cuts lending rate as retail sales and factory output decline. And on to the Mirror. They run with dying mum's plight. Heartbreaking reality of energy bills crisis. Mum can't afford to make final memories with her girls as cash goes on power. And now Tuesday's Times, over 50s to be called for new COVID jab in weeks. And Tuesday's Daily Express goes with Truss, I will fight off bid to split union. And finally, we go to the front cover of the Daily Star. This is Predator, City Star in dock. And there's a quotation from the prosecutor, Timothy Cray, in the trial of the Manchester City footballer, Benjamin Mendy. And those are tomorrow's front covers. And we're going to begin the show with an exclusive from Tuesday's Telegraph. This is on migrant patrols, Josh. What's happening here?
So the Royal Mail, which have presently been patrolling at the request of the government...
Royal Navy.
What did I say?
Royal Mail. I mean, that would be an interesting story if they were doing that.
Really
God, this is not a good start.
Let's outsource
We
it
don't even
to
have
the
a story
post
about the Royal Mail today.
No, we don't.
There's
No.
no
We
excuse
do now.
whatsoever for this. Let me start again. OK. So, the
Royal Navy.
The Royal Navy, definitely the Royal Navy, not the Army or anybody else.
Yeah.
The people with the boats
Yep.
were requested by the government to come in and patrol the channel.
Yes.
I believe I've got that bit right.
You
The
have,
channel,
absolutely, yeah.
That's the bit that goes between France and...
the
there we go.
water-based.
So, yeah. And they have now informed the Home Office, I think I've got that bit as well, right, that this taxi service will now come to an end in the new year, January 31st. Well, this is not the new year. So, but, you know, after the year. And it's an interesting thing reading the article because the idea was it was brought in, I guess, as a deterrent.
Yes.
But it's not a real deterrent because it's not like they're kind of puncturing these boats or shooting anything down.
No, they're helping people, aren't
They're
they?
helping people.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's what we're doing. And that's why they said that it's really a sort of deluxe taxi service. I guess the idea was to bring the people straight to these centres to be sort of registered and whatnot.
But it's not helping the situation.
But it's not helping.
And I mean, the Navy needs to be elsewhere.
Yeah,
There's
well,
other
that's it.
things
Of course, certainly with Russia, what's going over there, and they don't need, and it's underfunded arguably anyway. So they're saying that, there's already the Home Office, the Coast Guard, the Border Patrol.
Yeah.
These are the people. That's their job and that's their remit. So unless the new Prime Minister comes in and says, no, you're still going to be doing it in the new year, this part of it will come to an end.
But the new Prime Minister, whoever it may be, is going to have to do something about this. I mean, these figures are quite shocking, aren't they? The number of migrant crossings has doubled to more than 20,000 this year, in spite of the Navy's intervention. I mean, it's something... And also, of course, if you are... This seems to be often, to me, to be reduced to a question of whether you're pro or anti-migrant. But, of course, if you care about these people who are doing this, you have to recognise they're in one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world on these small blow-up boats. It's incredibly dangerous. Lots of people have died. Criminal gangs are exploiting them. Really, we've got to sort this out for their sake more than anything.
True, but obviously it just doesn't feel like this was the solution.
No, it's not.
It seemed like a good visual, and look, we're going to get the Royal Mail or Navy or whoever it is out there delivering letters to these guys. Welcome to the UK.
I think probably the French government bear a little bit of responsibility for all of this. Anyway, on to Tuesday's Guardian now, and Boris has basically clocked out, hasn't he, Nick?
It does seem that way. Number 10, Mitch Johnson will only be contacted if urgent while on holiday. So he's on his second holiday. He's just been to Slovenia. Now he's off somewhere else with Carrie. And
probably Greece. He was spied in Athens.
Greece.
Like I think someone from Heat magazine or some paparazzi spotted him in Athens.
Yeah, and it's quite funny because Brandon Lewis has come on, senior Conservative MP, and said, even when you're not in the office in Downing Street, you are working. Well, not really. If you're only being contacted in an emergency, you're pretty much specifically not working.
Yeah.
But then to be very fair, and I like to be fair, he does say, well, I can assure you he'll still be going through inboxes. He'll still be dealing with national security issues where relevant. Being out of the country does not mean the Prime Minister stops working. Brackets, it kind of does.
Yeah, but it does feel like, I mean, they use the phrase zombie government. Lots of people are using that phrase. And it's like this moment where two people are vying for the crown, and the one who's got the crown is like, oh, well, I'll just go on holiday. I'm not fussed.
And I do think there is an argument for Rishi to just concede so we can get on with... We've got the cost of living crisis, we've got all these things. Boris is off on holiday. Why we're in this really long leadership contest, people care a little bit, but Truss is basically winning by a mile. Why not just end it now, put Truss in? Boris can go on as many holidays as he wants then, he'll be retired.
I mean, Boris wanted to go on until October. I mean, that would have been even worse.
So two things here. First of all, we're lucky that we have a Deputy Prime Minister who's really also stepped up. Oh, no! No, he's not doing any meetings this week either. No major meetings. Not that
Is
there's
anyone
anything
doing
massive, anything going on
at the government? Is something happening?
Well, no. Actually, there is a story coming up where amazingly the government did do something.
Okay,
but
it's all about the leadership.
It is all about. But this goes back to the question of why didn't just Boris resign at the time? I personally think it's because he wanted this party at Chequers. And
really? You think it was just
I think it was just about that. You know what it's like you guys you're not married, but organising a wedding is a massive faff. So he probably was like, oh, we're going to have to redo the invites, going to have to do all this stuff. And then it came out that they were doing it at Chequers, and everyone was like, well, you can't do that now. And then, so even then, he'd already sort of gone...
I think he probably had an eye on getting back in and thinking it wasn't over because there was that petition raising all those signatures. Yeah. We want Boris back. Lord Cruddas, wasn't it? And I still think part of him probably thought, I can still win this. I've just realised, Andrew, with your blue tie, you look a lot like a Tory. Could you step up?
You know what? A lot of people have suggested that, but the trouble is, I'm not a Tory and I've never voted Tory, so I don't know if I would...
Twitter says you are.
It does indeed. It says I'm a lot of things. It also says I'm a robust heterosexual, apparently. Anyway, on to Tuesday's Sun now, and the leader of the Labour Party is offering up solutions. Are these too good to be true, Josh?
I don't know if they're too... This is what the Sun is saying. Strangely, the Sun is like jetting back from his Spanish holiday, like he's this big multi-millionaire. No, he went on holiday, and half of his interview this morning on Radio 4 was all about, oh, well, you've been on holiday. It's like, well, first of all, he's not in government. And secondly... and he said, I'm not going to apologise for going on holiday. He said, I've got two jobs. One is being the leader of the Labour Party, and the other one is being a father.
But what is he promoting?
So so what he has promoted, and first of all, and the other thing I just got to say is, he was being criticised last week about not having a plan. Now he's come back with a plan, and everyone's criticising. Right. But it's an idea, and it's not necessarily a new idea. But the idea is that he's going to cap the energy costs as they are.
Yes.
It's going to be... He's promising £29 billion plan to help hard-up families to save around £1,000.
Right.
And he's going to be paying for it by beefing up the windfall tax with
But a similar idea was previously proposed by Scottish Power boss Keith Anderson.
Yeah.
And this article mentions this, and this was back in April. And he was basically saying, we will freeze the bills for 2 years and the government will subsidise people so that people don't get plunged into poverty. Yeah. But Rishi Sunak said no.
Well, Rishi Sunak, but this is what Keir Starmer's saying. But the interesting thing also is that the idea is then it would keep inflation down or take it down by 4%. And that is very important in terms, certainly when it comes to negotiations and all these supposed pay rises and people striking and whatnot. That 4% makes a big difference. When everyone says, oh, inflation's gone up 11% and we've only got a 5% pay increase. So if it was actually like 9%, it's much more justifiable to go, well, just accept
inflation as well. It's not just the cost of living, it's the inflation as well.
It seems like a good idea to me, but obviously a Tory MP's come out and said it's magical solutions, whatever. It's like, that seems like a sensible solution. At least it's a solution.
Well, I didn't even think that Gordon Brown's suggestion of nationalising the services was that bad.
But you're a big lefty, Andrew, so you loved it.
Well, what do you think, Nick?
Well, it's got a blue tie on.
I've got a blue tie. Is it confusing you?
Well, I think from a purely political perspective, this is the danger again of the zombie government, because you get people like Brown and people like Starmer step in with more socialist solutions, and Truss, of course, says, no, I'm going to lower taxes, and that's how I'm going to do it. But as we saw at the GB forum the other day in Lee on GBNews with Liz Truss, someone said to her, but the problem is I need help now. So this is the problem. People need help now with the cost of living. Boris is on holiday. We've got this leadership campaign. Tories really need to do something about it because Labour are now stepping up and saying, we would have the solution. Even if they can't do anything, it doesn't look good for the...
It doesn't. I mean, people need to think that something is going to be done because these figures are getting out of control. Every few days there's another story that's going to be even more expensive come next year. This is something that whoever the new leader is really going to have to get a grip on, surely. Anyway, on to Tuesday's Independent now. Some classic victim blaming from the Islamic Republic of Iran. Nick, what a surprise.
That's so Islamic Republic of Iran.
This is what they're like, isn't it? Absolutely. Gosh. Well, they've been saying this for a long time, that Salman Rushdie, responsible for...
I thought they were great guys, left-wing Twitter's been telling me, but Salman Rushdie stabbing, Iran denies involvement and says author himself is to blame for attack. I mean, you'd assume, since the fatwa was put there by Iran, they could get rid of it, but no, it's Saddam... sorry, not even Saddam, it's Salman Rushdie's fault. So the shocking thing, he says... So this is... who is this? This is their foreign... I've forgotten the guy's name. Anyway, basically Iran have said the incident of the attack on Salman Rushdie...
Kanani.
Thank you, that guy.
Mr. Kanani.
They're saying they do not consider that anyone deserves blame and accusations except him and his supporters. Yeah, this is Nasser Kanani. And the other thing he said that really bothered me, he said the West condemning the actions of the attacker and in return for glorifying the actions of the insulter to Islamic beliefs is a contradictory attitude. Which it's not a contradictory attitude at all. It's entirely consistent with our values. I mean, also, one of them wrote a book in the 80s, one of them stabbed someone in the neck. I mean, they're not equivalent at all. So he's saying this is some sort of hypocrisy on our part, which doesn't make any sense at all.
I mean, I suppose it's about getting into the mindset of people who feel that... I mean, let's face it, the mullahs of Tehran do not believe in freedom of speech. They don't think that. They think that they think that if you insult their religion, then you deserve to die. Okay, so this is a fundamentally incompatible worldview to the worldview that we hold, and I can bet you anything that they haven't read the book anyway.
Yeah, and I said the other night when we talked about this that we've become increasingly soft on those two issues, free speech and Islamic extremism. But then I was watching an old Question Time from, I believe it was from 2007. Even then, Shirley Williams was saying that Salman Rushdie shouldn't receive a knighthood in case it angered people, which is an appalling attitude.
It was appeasement.
Yeah, it was appalling then, it's appalling now.
Yeah.
Josh, any further thoughts?
Well, just also, I don't really understand this idea that it's his supporters are also to be blamed.
Right, well, anyone who is justifying a novelist writing a novel.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It's pretty... And let's remember that it was only in 2012 that Iran actually upped the bounty by another 500,000. So this isn't like ancient history.
And I mean, the thing is, even if it was insulting to their faith, so what? Yeah. He's allowed to insult their faith.
Look,
I mean, this is the thing.
If you are a Muslim, then of course that's offensive to you, and you will not blaspheme because that's part of your moral system or part of your belief system.
So don't buy the book.
But I'm not a Muslim. You guys aren't Muslims. If you're going to, if you want to insult Judaism, it's like it's not going to stop me believing my beliefs.
And if there was a book that offended your faith...
Don't do it, Nick!
Don't do it, Nick.
He's ready.
But you wouldn't read a book that was likely to upset
Maybe I will read it. I read The God Delusion. I read it, and I was like, I disagree with parts of this, and I deliberately read it to be provoked.
I mean, the thing is, what I really didn't do it... I mean, look, I would say this because Salman Rushdie is one of my favourite novelists, but The Satanic Verses is a brilliant book, and people should read it. All these people I see online say, oh, well, it's boring anyway, it's rubbish. Well, you haven't read it, clearly. It's a fantastic piece of work.
Well, that's a fairly ridiculous argument. Boris Johnson used that in the past, a fairly glib argument that, whether we should give him a knighthood. He said, well, it's not a very good book. A comedian used the same argument just the other day, so online. So, yeah, it's ridiculous. And I will say as well, some of the takes on this have been absolutely pathetic. Jolly and Morn weighed in and said, there was an article on free speech that said, well, it doesn't engage with relative power. We need to know if it's challenging or embedding power. This is the guy that embedded a baseball bat in a fox's head, by the way, and he's got a terrible take on everything. Well, it's not to do with relative power, it's to do with free speech.
This is incredible. Jolly Morn, who's a tax lawyer and Twitter activist, from what I can see, is basically equivocating and talking about the way in which, I mean, it's the typical...
Yeah, let's just see everything in terms of power.
It's not. I don't think it's about the left. I think it's this critical social justice woke ideology. They see everything as... They see all expressions of art as basically either upholding privilege or and attacking the marginalised, or defending the marginalised against the privileged. They can only see it in that way.
Yeah, but when I say leftist, doesn't this come from Foucault and this kind of postmodernist type of thinking?
Exactly, but that's why I don't think it's leftist particularly.
But I think it is interesting that you have managed to kind of show how knowledgeable you are on Salman Rushdie's books. Like it's good for you to show like how well read you are.
Is that what this is
I'm
really
just saying,
about?
like when we were on Free Speech Nation yesterday, you were like you're doing all these quotes from all the different books.
The reason I do that, Josh.
Look at me, everybody. I've read all these
I love
books.
that Josh has things I've got an extra. He is one of my favourite novelists.
Okay.
What annoys
so I'm
me
going to
about-
do that because his books are brilliant.
What's annoying is
maybe if you read a few of them.
If someone attacked Enid Blyton, then I'd be able to do loads of cool stuff.
Exactly. We've read different books because I'm not into magic realism. I was saying I haven't read Marquez either, but it doesn't mean he should be attacked, though, does it?
But I mean, I think, I'm particularly enthusiastic about this because I love this novel. He's one of the few living novelists who I will go out and buy his new books when they come out and read them, and I don't do that with many.
It's still not the central issue, is it, on whether you should be attacked?
Ultimately, it doesn't. Even if his books were terrible, I'd still be saying he shouldn't be attacked for writing them. I mean, it comes down to this. Oh, anyway, Josh trying to show me up there. I'll get him back in the next part. Anyway, we're going to move on now to a really sexy story now from Tuesday's Guardian on big leaking pipes.
Yeah, so this was raised about a week ago by the Lib Dems, but there's calls now for water companies who have made immense profits, who have not been reinvesting that money into pipes. They haven't invested in any reservoirs, they haven't fixed the leaks, they are not stopping the sewage pollution. So there are calls for the bosses to not get their bonuses until this stuff is sorted. So the bosses of these water companies, they've received 58 million in pay. This is since privatisation. 58 million in pay over the last 5 years, I should say. Sorry. Also, shareholders have been paid 72 billion in dividends. That's come out of the water industry. And these companies have debts of 56 billion, and the prices have gone up 40%.
So why can't they fix their pipes then?
Because guess what? They're private companies and they've gone in, they go, hey, we're going to make as much money as possible, we're going to pay our shareholders, we're going to pay our bosses, we're going to make millions and billions of pounds, and guess who's going to get the brunt of it?
But I don't think people appreciate the extent of this. We have got 1.1 trillion litres of water every year leaking out of shoddy old pipes. That's actually...
A quarter.
A quarter of all the water. Yeah. And then here we are saying there's a drought, we can't use hose pipes. Just fix
They haven't built any new reservoirs since this happened. And... you're talking earlier about privatisation. This is absolutely a case for privatisation because they have a monopoly. Yeah. We have no choice. It's not like you can go from East Anglia Water to other. They've carved up the country, and you have to accept their business.
I mean, Nick, even though you're a big defender of private companies, I think you would admit that the government should get involved here when it's affecting everyone. It's not like we can opt out of water.
Yeah, it depends to what degree. I noticed that Fergal Sharkey, former Undertones singer, who is now a Rivers campaigner. Yeah, that's a big career shift, isn't it? That's the biggest career shift I've seen.
Not really. I mean, he's from Derry, and the River Foyle is one of the most beautiful rivers.
That's the biggest change I've seen since Andrew Doyle went from teacher to far-right agitator. But he says that we need to put in place an enforcement order where they can legally demand that water companies do things exactly at the government's choosing when the government wants.
Right.
Isn't that communism, though? But I do admit it's a huge problem with this. We did cover this leakage.
Come on. It's not communism, is it, to get involved with something? It's one of those basic necessities of life.
It is.
We are mostly composed of water, aren't we? I'm not a scientist, but something like that. I think it's important.
They always say it's 80%. With Josh, it's like 95. But yeah,
bit more with Josh. Anyway, we're going to move on now to another story. This is a positive news now for a change. This is from Tuesday's Metro. Nick.
Yep, game-changing scientific breakthrough changes blood type of donor kidneys. So researchers have successfully altered the blood type of 3 donor kidneys, and this could have a massive impact on patients waiting for a transplant, because if you've got someone with an A blood type, which is more rare, that can be changed to the universal O type, which will allow more transplants to take place. And they do it in a pretty standard way. It's your classic normothermic perfusion machine, which just...
I was going to say that.
All about that.
Yeah.
I think I read, isn't that one of Salman Rushdie's novels?
It's one of Salman Rushdie's novels, exactly.
This is later work. Yeah. So this flushes blood infused with an enzyme through the deceased donor kidney, and the enzyme removes the blood type markers that line the blood vessels of the kidney, which lead to the organ being converted to the O type. So that's the way I do it.
They get one of those big hoses, the hoses that you clean like the outside of your foyers and all that stuff.
Well, I don't.
The high-pressure water flow, they just do that with a liver, like push all that blood out and all the enzymes out, and then
that's your scientific take on that.
I'm giving you like a layman's.
But this is great news, isn't it? Like for people waiting on transplant lists, and now they can make you know, the kidneys can fit into more bodies, basically.
It's huge news. I did have the stray thought. Do you think people who hate us online, what would they do if they were going to get some blood or a kidney or something, but it came from GBNews or, like, came from, like, Andrew Doyle?
That would be interesting. And then it would be like the plot of a film. They get my kidney, and they suddenly start reading Salman Rushdie novels.
Yeah, and they're talking about free speech.
And talking about free speech and stuff like that, yeah.
I thought the interesting part of this article, although this is fantastic news for people waiting for transplants, is the ethnic element here, because 9% of organ donations come from black and minority ethnic donors, but ethnic patients make up 33% of people who need kidneys.
Oh.
So there's a sort of interesting thing here, and one of the persons that they've got, because type B is the rarer type.
Yes.
So essentially people from ethnic minority backgrounds have to wait like a third longer, sometimes 6 to 10 years longer. So I think this is obviously particularly going to be advantageous for them, but then you have to sort of not wonder why, but encourage ethnic minorities to do it, because it can go against some, like, religious elements,
of course, yes,
Islam and things like that. So
absolutely.
It is interesting, and this is amazing news.
But it is good news, and we always like a bit of good news.
Well done, Cambridge University.
Because we don't normally have it. Anyway, that is it for part one. So coming up, Trump decrees a warning for the United States of America, why university degrees aren't worth the paper they're written on, and the tragic effect inflation is having on the privately educated. See you in 2 minutes.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm still Andrew Doyle. He's still Josh Howie, and he's most definitely Nick the Big Dog Dixon. So let's crack on. We've got Tuesday's Independent now, and a stark warning from your mate, Donald Trump. Nick.
Yeah, we are mates. Trump warns terrible things are going to happen as he's blamed for anti-FBI violence. There's tremendous anger in the country at a level that's never been seen before, other than during very perilous times, Trump says, and he's saying that the temperature has to be brought down. And you see, Trump, so he is trying to bring the temperature down, but he's making a true point that the investigation of Trump and similar things are going to escalate tensions. We've already seen, for example, the arrest of Roger Stone, where they raided his house. They're trying to put Bannon in prison now. We saw Peter Navarro, formerly in the Trump administration, put in shackles, leg shackles, and arrested. And so this is bound to cause problems because the government is abusing its power to threaten its opponents. There's just no other way of looking at it.
But how do we, the truth is that the FBI, perception and trust in the FBI is so low. Could there have been, they're talking here about the allegation that he had classified documents in the house. Would there have been another way to do this?
Of course, and he points out the other day, Obama had millions of classified documents. It's a very bad... Whichever side you're on, you should be against this because it's escalating tensions in America. It's not going to be good for the country. And, by the way, Trump here, the claim will be on the left that Trump's somehow inciting violence. I don't think he is. We see that the left, whenever there's a problem, they go and burn everything down. Kavanaugh, by the way, Supreme Court, because of the recent decisions with abortion and because of some of the gun control stuff, a guy went to Kavanaugh's house with a gun to kill him. This is in the New York Times. So it's a lefty paper.
Yeah.
And he was prevented. But ironically, he said one of his problems was that Kavanaugh was going to be too loose on gun control. The guy with a gun who wants to kill Kavanaugh. So remember, there's violence on both sides, but Trump's trying to say, look, don't do this because you'll create chaos.
Look, Josh, don't we think that irrespective of where you stand on this issue or where your support base lies or whether you have an affinity for the Republicans or the Democrats, this kind of thing and the way in which it's played out can actually play into... Firstly, it can play into Trump's hands, but it also does raise the temperature.
It does raise temperature, and he's the one who's raising the temperature. He says the temperature... On one hand, he's saying the temperature has to be brought down. On the other hand, he's saying we're not going to stand for another scam.
Yeah.
It's like he's the one raising the temperature. This is his defence for doing something illegal, which is taking top-secret documents out of the White House and into his private residence.
Do you not think, though, that that they must have known that he would spin this to his advantage? That must have been.
Well, they have a job which is to prevent law breaking, or in this case, to track down top secret documents that have been removed from the White House.
So
Nick's shaking his head there.
Well, they weren't top
Josh
secret.
was shaking his head throughout my bit and pointing at the story. And
it's because they're top secret documents. He broke the law.
You're the only person that thinks this in the world.
The whole world, yeah.
You and a couple of communists. It's so absurd. It's the only time they've investigated a former president in this way. They go to his house.
Yes, because he's the only person who's taken top secret documents.
No, he's not the only person. Obama took a load of documents exactly the same.
What, top secret?
It was exactly the same.
He took the same documents with nuclear secrets, right?
Trump is suggesting that they've been declassified. That's the...
Well, no, he's saying they've been declassified, but that's his defence now, because he's saying his law is that any document that he ever took out of the White House is now declassified.
I've got to be allowed to come back on that.
Come on. Yeah, come on.
What about the two...
You start going about communists?
No. What about the two failed impeachments? Total nonsense. What about the Russia hoax? Complete waste of time, waste of taxpayers' money. Another fraud. You must realise they'll do anything they can to take Trump out. You're like, oh, the FBI is totally legitimate. They go to his house in Florida. They said the lawyers have to look at the wall. You've got to turn the cameras off. This whole thing's absurd. Why is Peter Navarro in leg shackles?
So the stuff they took out...
Why is he in leg shackles?
So they planted it like he's saying. So you're following what he's saying, which is...
No, I'm saying the lawyers weren't allowed to look at what was happening.
So you're going with his narrative, which is, oh, they could put in anything they want. That's what he's saying.
Well, I think
you're going with it.
This sort of dispute and different perspectives is, it's going to be inevitable. But ultimately, I'm interested in the way in which this plays out and the way in this is perceived.
It's a Pyrrhic victory. Josh can say all he wants. It's good that they're doing it. It's not good. It's pushing America towards some sort of civil war. It's a Pyrrhic victory because you anger half the country. You can hate them all you want. I know people
I don't hate
in
anybody,
London who want
This
Trump...
is a different country. I don't care. It's America.
No, I know people in London who want Trump to die in jail. They're obsessed with it for some reason.
Well, I'm not talking about that.
No, but I'm saying people think like that. It's dangerous for the country.
Well, look,
it's not a way to treat the political opponents. They'll do the same to you later.
We've got to move on. I've got to move on. Tuesday's Daily Mail now, and the degrees aren't worth the paper if they're written on. If you're an accountancy firm, that is.
Making one final point about Trump. No, joking.
Josh, do not usurp my role as host, Josh.
Follow the path. OK. This is quite interesting. So PwC, which is a big accountancy firm, have said that you no longer need a 2.1 degree if you want to go and work for them.
OK.
So I didn't realise how many people had a 2.1 or above or a first.
What is it?
It's basically 83%, if I've got my maths right.
No, that can't be right.
Yeah, 83%. So only 17% of graduates do not receive a 2.1 or less now. That's great inflation. I know that is. So really what they're saying is they're opening up their job market to the bottom 13%.
That can't be good. I don't want to sound like a snob.
No, but they're basically saying that there are attributes and all-round proven capabilities
there weren't
that maybe
that many
lay outside.
people getting that level of a degree when I was at university.
Well, obviously, yeah, but there's been great inflation. Now that you pay for it that much more, you got to get...
Oh, great, so that devalues my degree.
Oh, completely.
Yeah, well, look, mate, I think you did all right with your Oxfam
degree.
Doctorate, whatever it is. Salman Rushdie.
Doctor of Charities.
Reading, yeah.
Yes, Nick.
Yeah, so I'm both vehemently against this and in favour of it, depending. So if it's just lowest common denominator, scraping the barrel, oh, we'll accept anyone now, we'll lower this bar, you know what I mean? That kind of lowest common denominator thinking, which is the way we ended up with a comprehensive school system and decline from grammar schools, which is another story. I hate that kind of thing. But if it really is, like, you know, bigotry of low expectations, I hate that. But if it is just actually opening it up to other things other than academic qualifications, which are fairly pointless, then I totally agree with it. When it says here, they're going to diversify its graduate intake through broader access to talented young people who may not have top academic achievements, but have the attributes and all-round proven capabilities for a career. So we all know a lot of these degrees are not that useful. So if you've got other attributes, there's no reason you shouldn't be considered. So you see, depending on which take it is, I don't know whether to be in favour or not.
They're talking about this is to increase socio-economic diversity, poorer people effectively. Now, look, you don't... I mean, I went to a comp, you know, I was on a full grant because we didn't have much money. So you can still achieve...
It's not correlated, yeah.
No, and I think it's a bit patronising to people from working class backgrounds to say you can't get a 2-1 or higher. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Especially you can if its grades have inflated to such a degree.
And you can argue that those socio-economic factors will be more prevalent when you're 15, 16, 17, 18. When someone's left and in university and in their early 20s, at that point, either you're getting down and doing the hard work to get your degree and get an OK grade.
I think you might have more of a case at A-level, right? So because, you know, it's definitely the case that private school kids are grilled and drilled and they will get those grades irrespective of their level of talent. They'll get their A's, right? And a working class kid at a comp maybe won't, right? And maybe universities do need to take that into account. But once you're at university, you shouldn't be having that. I mean, particularly so many people getting 2-1s, you shouldn't be having that.
No.
You know, and you shouldn't be able to get these top jobs.
Look, I went to a terrible comprehensive and got a good grade as well, but it's easy to imagine someone who maybe didn't get themselves together at university but has other life skills who would be better than the 2-1 person. That's quite easy to imagine.
Possible.
The only problem is it does also further devalue the people with degrees, and I think people with degrees, you know, should be made aware of this kind of thing if once they're going to spend the money, even though education for its own sake is good as well. But
Right, on to Tuesday's Times now. Middle-class jobs seem pretty easy, Nick.
Yep, 2/3 of desks empty as staff stay home most of the week. So a study in 13 countries has shown that working from home has become the norm. Workers are travelling to the office an average of 1.4 days a week, with attendance on Fridays dropping to 12%. This was a study of 80 offices in 13 countries, representing 80,000 employees. So it's a lot of people, and it does seem that people want to work from home.
So what's happened? Is this just the pandemic? People just got used to it?
Yes, they're blaming it on that. They're saying the hybrid working genie is out of the bottle due to the lockdowns, not the pandemic. I call it the lockdowns. But people... It's a few things, Andrew. People are lazy, even against their own interests. I mean, look, I did almost 2,000 gigs, or I've done in comedy over 11 years. I didn't want to do a single one of them, but I'm glad I did, because, you know, you get things from it. So, of course, given the option, one thinks, no, I'll just stay at home, even if it's better for you, and even if it's more productive sometimes to go in. But I do sympathise, because commuting is horrible, especially with train and tube strikes. And at the same time, I've worked from home in the past and found that sometimes you can get more done, but there's also a lack of meaning and an isolation that goes with it. A taxi driver was telling me the other day that there was a banker who would threaten to sue his company to say, no, I want to go back into work. And last thing I'll say, an interesting thing Elon Musk does is he allows top performers to work from home as a reward, which is another interesting thing. Last point, actually, I will say, we can't do it. I have to come here to GB. I have to go to Swindon for another thing.
But you enjoy coming in here, right?
I love coming here. But obviously, doing comedy gigs, I hated having to travel all around the country. The irony was, when we finally did Zoom gigs, I hated them and didn't do them either.
Well, you know, what do you think, Josh? Because, you know, ultimately, people are just becoming accustomed to working from home. And, you know, I understand the point that a lot of people don't enjoy their jobs and don't enjoy going in, and that's horrible, you know, and you would want to avoid. But ultimately, you have a job to do. And isn't it part of being part of the community at work and seeing people and interacting?
I think I agree with bosses. Some bosses are saying that there's something being lost by just keeping people at home. And also the younger workforce who might be living in flats and not having the space. I don't know if it's necessarily good for mental health to be sort of, in a way, locked up like that.
Maybe this is just where we are now.
Well, I think this hybrid thing, but then it's going to have an interesting impact on our cities, on our inner cities, on how to reuse these spaces, these office spaces. So there's a larger ramification. It was coming into play even before COVID. Yeah. It just obviously got massively accelerated.
Yeah. OK, very interesting. Tuesday's Telegraph next. And amidst all this hardship, let's spare a thought for the privately educated.
Yeah, so they're saying that inflation is pushing private school education above £500,000. Now, that is for a child who starts boarding school 7 years or under and stays through boarding school the whole time, and that's with...
And what is it for day schools?
For day schools, it's about £20,000 a year at the moment. For boarding school, it's about £37,000.
I mean, some of these fees are absolutely huge. I mean, it says here Brighton College charges 46 grand a year.
Yeah, Charterhouse, 44,000. So this is a huge amount of money. They're saying you need like an income of about over £100,000 to be able to pay for that. I think, first of all, sending your child to boarding school at 6, 7 is not good.
Yeah.
I think
depends on the parents.
It does depend. That's true. Actually, in my case, I went to boarding school. I'm slightly traumatised, as people can obviously. I don't even know the difference between Royal Mail and Royal Navy, so I didn't learn very much.
We would have forgotten about it if you hadn't mentioned it.
Wasted education. But this is what I genuinely do believe is I wish that money, my parents had just kind of bought a flat.
And then you could benefit from that today.
And then you could rent out, buy a house somewhere.
It would have been a huge benefit because it would have been so much cheaper.
It would have gone up so much more. Yeah, you could then have
You
sold
would never
it.
work a day in your life.
But look, we mustn't use the show to settle scores with parents.
No.
Nick, I mean, look, the thing is, this is an awful lot of money. I mean, I do worry about this as well because actually, if you're paying this much money for your child's education, and actually these are the very schools, these very posh, privileged schools that are pushing this ideological nonsense the most. So in fact, they're the worst kind of education at the moment in the current climate.
That may be true, and also it's just going to push the gap even wider because imagine you still can afford this. Imagine how loaded you are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you still can afford this, so it makes the gap even wider between the so-called have-nots and have-yachts, which is a term I've heard on the internet. But to me, it just reminds me once again of the decline of the grammars, which I did a podcast on the other day that Peter Hitchens said was rather good, which in his
world, that's a massive compliment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's just something that makes me so angry because my dad came from a poor background, but he got to go to a grammar school because he was smart, passed 11+. We lost all that post about 1965, changed the comprehensives. We lost all that. And that people could have got a great education without paying, and we had social mobility, and that's gone. And this is just another nail in the coffin of social mobility and education.
I have to say,
I can't even talk.
A lot of these schools aren't able. Funnily enough, now that a lot of these schools are not going to Oxbridge and not getting, as we saw on the front page of one of the newspapers.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That actually going to these expensive schools doesn't guarantee you those places anymore.
But then, like as Nick says, you might end up in a school that isn't very good because we don't have a grammar school system
fine.
anymore.
You're just going to get a job with PwC.
PwC because they don't have any standards anymore. Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, that's it for part 2. Coming up after the break, Nick will be deconstructing Graham Souness's unenlightened views. Jerry Sadowitz demands an apology. And we have an incredibly lazy dog. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Andrew Doyle, and Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. So we're going to crack straight on with Tuesday's Telegraph. This is... Now, apparently I mispronounced his name earlier. Graham Souness. Souness, yes?
Souness.
Right, now this is some kind of football person, and this is about a response to an online onslaught he's faced, yes?
Yep. Graham Souness doesn't regret a word of comments that spark sexism row, and that's exactly right. Never apologise to these people, Andrew. I mean women. No, I mean the mob that wants you to apologise, of course. So Graham Souness said the other day it's a man's game, talking about men's football, and he clearly meant as opposed to a boys' game or hypothetical softer men's game.
I see.
He was referring to the fact that referees have become a bit more lenient again this season, reminding him of earlier times when it was more robust. So, in the 70s, you could basically kill a guy. If you go far enough back, in like the 50s, you could push the keeper into the net and try and kill him. But nowadays, it's, VAR.
Really? Was that allowed?
That was many years
Was it
ago.
not frowned upon, surely?
It was allowed many decades ago until there were too many people got injured. So, but football used to be much more robust. Graham Souness is saying that. But this being the modern world and where we are, some of the female footballers have kicked off online. Bethany England said, get in the bin. What a disgraceful thing to say after this summer the country's just seen. You have to be pretty stupid or pretty disingenuous to say that. He's not referring to women at all. He's simply saying men as opposed to, as I say...
As opposed to boys.
Yeah. And those kind of phrases have been around for years. It separates the men from the boys, etc. So
he's not doubling... But he's not going to apologise. He's going to...
No, because he knows what he meant. And why should he apologise? It's absurd. And there was also a moment where he said it was a great game. It was just men at it. And then the female opponent sort of looked ironically towards the camera, like I do sometimes. And you just think, this is why we shouldn't have women in our spaces.
Goodness me, Nick. I knew you'd have to go too far.
Yeah, but what he said wasn't sexist. What I said may have been, but I'm defending Souness.
I think most definitely what you said was. But I think this is the point, isn't it, that they are entitled to criticise what he said and, in fact, to misinterpret what he said, if indeed that is what it is. But he's also entitled not to apologise and get on with it, right?
Yeah,
that's how this works, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, he said, look, I'd never heard of him. I don't watch, but he says, he says, our game has always been unique. It's always been more meaty. And that doesn't inspire me. I don't really want to watch meaty football.
I do.
That's
the only type of football I do want to watch.
Okay, fair enough.
And I say that as
men were playing men. They were falling out with each other. Oh, God. Is it getting you a bit hot and bothered?
Yeah, I've got to move on. Anyway, Tuesday's Times once more. Jerry Sadowitz demanding an apology, Josh. Now, we of course, have been speaking about this the other day, the comedian Jerry Sadowitz. Give us a background to this.
So Jerry Sadowitz was doing a show in Edinburgh at the Pleasance, or organised by the Pleasance Theatre, which is one of the venues up in Edinburgh, probably arguably one of the most prestigious ones. And after the first night, they came out and said there were a bunch of walkouts, which turns out there wasn't actually that many walkouts at all. No. And we're going to cancel his show for the second night.
Now, there's always some walkouts at a Jerry Sadowitz show.
There's always some walkouts at every single show.
Yeah, there's that.
And they basically said this was they came out with this contradictory statement that it was they're all up for free speech and they don't want to censor what comics do, but then at the same time they said this stuff we can't say, so it was totally contradictory. Then they've doubled down. Then they've obviously had a bit of blowback, so they've doubled down and essentially called him racist and sexist and bigoted.
And we have to be clear, his onstage persona is racist, sexist, bigoted, etc. But it's a persona.
Yeah, and it's in the context of a comedy show.
Right.
And so he's had to come out now and say, well, wait a minute, I didn't want to embarrass the Pleasance, but actually I didn't really have that many walkouts. It was a good show, and I have to fight them because they're and he's had to, and he's done the worst thing, which he's been forced to do something terrible, which is to have to justify himself in terms of to explain that he actually puts thought into his acts. Once you start talking about comedy, it's not funny.
This is one thing, Nick, I found quite tragic about it, because it does feel like he's had to break character to explain how his act works to these utter half-wits who don't appear to understand comedy and yet are running a comedy venue.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. And I've supported him immediately since it happened on Twitter, and I wish I was a respected comedian, Andrew, and then I could just tear it all down over this, but it doesn't really matter what I say, or Leo, or even the mighty Andrew Doyle, because the cathedral comedians have to speak out about it. Basically,
and by that you mean?
I mean Stuart Lee, basically. To be fair, some of them have. When I say cathedral, I mean the establishment comedians in the lefty bubble. And Catherine Ryan has come out and said something which is good. Richard Herring even has. So it'd be interesting to see if some of the others do.
And a guy called Simon Evans? I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yes, Evans is sort of on our team. So
do we not think there should be a case? Why aren't comedians at the Pleasance saying, well, we're not going to do our shows? And I mean the mainstream ones. I mean the ones with the big audience.
Yeah. Well, I said I would love to boycott the Pleasance if I hadn't already boycotted the entire festival and the comedy industry. So it wouldn't be much for me, but they should be. And I just want to come back on their statement, which was so pathetic. Their initial statement was pathetic. Their second one was even worse. It had all the buzzwords of, whatever you want to call it, wokeness. It had like all the isms. It had unsafe. It had progress, so-called global majorities found their way in a changing world. This was the most baffling paragraph. In a changing world, stories and language that were once accepted on stage, whether performed in character or not, need to be challenged. Do they,
it was really high-handed, because the head of the Pleasance was talking about how Sadowitz's kind of material has no place on the festival. Who the hell are you to say what has a place on the festival or not? I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. And, Josh, this has obviously annoyed me a bit, but I think particularly because they've used that language that Nick just evoked, unsafe. The audience felt unsafe.
Well, it wasn't about, and it seems like it wasn't actually the audience. It seems like the people who are working, the staff who are mostly students up at the festival, they may have felt unsafe.
It's this conflation of words and violence again. No one is unsafe by someone telling jokes.
But on the positive side, Luke Johnson, who's a co-owner of the Assembly Rooms, which is also a fantastic venue, has come out and said that the Pleasance can get stuff telling other venues to ban artists just because they've lost their bottle. So people are standing up, people of authority are standing up. We talked about this yesterday, but I think it's a flashpoint to see if people are going to actually be brave and fight for their freedom within the medium that we love.
Right, well, let's move on to Tuesday's Mail now. And ministers have plans to deal with extremist speakers, Nick.
Yeah, ministers order civil service chiefs to trawl 5 years' worth of the social media history of potential speakers in order to block extremists and critics of government policy, in brackets, that last bit. And in some ways, it's not that weird, because I did Britain's Got Talent and they do that, but in some ways, it does sound very disturbing that they're going to go back 5 years looking for problematic or controversial material in the past 5 years. But weirdly, this has been demanded by Jacob Rees-Mogg. So therefore, what I suspect this actually is about sort of the woke takeover of the civil service that he talks about a lot, and they're probably trying to stop that infiltration.
But that's not what he says, though. He says it's about racist behaviour or things, extremism.
He says it's about extremism and criticising government, but wouldn't he just say that? I mean, it's just my guess. And if you look at this actual language later on, it's more moderate. He says, it says there's questions been raised over guidance, which says that vetting should be mindful of speakers' criticism of government officials or policy, or a strong political partiality, which sounds a bit more modest than we're going to troll through 5 years looking to see if you like the government.
That would trouble me as well. If the idea that the civil service is going to vet speakers simply because they've been critical of the government, that suggests a lack of impartiality among the civil service, doesn't it? They should be inviting people of all stripes.
They should be. And do you know what? It definitely sounds disturbing to me and wrong. But the part that confuses me is why would Mogg be behind it, which makes me think maybe it's like what I said about McCarthy the other day when I said that Joseph McCarthy didn't go far enough. Because if you do have an infiltration by a radical ideology that is an existential threat to your whole way of life, which is this new ideology we have, maybe you do need to sort of stamp people out. I don't know.
Nick, let's not have that.
I'm just giving a possibility.
What do you think, Josh? Because, I mean, this is interesting. Like, if they're saying that they want to check that people haven't said grotesquely racist things and then invite them to civil service, fine. I get that. You don't want someone like that coming onto the civil service. But if it's just people casually legitimately criticising the government, I don't think they should be vetted. That's a real worry.
No. That is a concern, but I think that there have been some examples in the past of people who've been brought in, and actually people being brought in for diversity issues, and then you go back into their history, and you're like, whoa, you said some pretty crazy stuff.
It's
like we're talking about slightly Islamist.
So that's extremism, right?
Yeah, extremism, exactly. And actually, everybody should be looking at people's social media, not of course for views where you disagree. But I wish that Labour would look into their candidates they put up for councillors, because when they put up a bunch of people in the recent by-elections, and about 5 of their councillors basically had to immediately get suspended because they had a load of anti-Semitism.
I mean,
why they're not doing
political
it?
candidates,
I mean, you had the Anne Frank Trust invited someone who was talking about death to Zionist scum and justifying the rockets. How these organisations are not looking at social media.
So if it is just vetting for extremism, that's one thing, but they use the phrase problematic phrases, and that worries me when you start using those kind of phrases.
Absolutely, of course.
Tuesday's Times, once more, and even Spider-Man can't endure the hellscape that is social media. Nick,
Spider-Man actor Tom Holland quit social media for sake of his mental health, and he says he goes into a spiral where he reads negative comments about himself online, and so he's taken a break, essentially, because it's detrimental to his mental state, which totally makes sense to me. I mean, he's got almost 70 million followers. I find it bad enough with my amount of followers.
I mean, he must get some all sorts of horrible...
It must be mad. I mean, I've muted everyone who doesn't already follow me so I can create an echo chamber. This is what I recommend to Tom, actually. If he is going to go back on, mute everyone who doesn't follow you, then you only see glowing things. Occasionally one bad one gets to, you get rid of that.
People underestimate the psychological effects that it can have of being abused constantly online because we're not equipped for this. You know, it's a million strangers who can just start attacking you needlessly.
Well, to be honest, I'm a little bit worried because, you know, Nick and I had a little bust up earlier. It's like, I'm going to be in the cab on the way home and I'm going to look and I'm going to say, yeah, no, you know, and all this, or I don't know what the hell, and I'm already a little bit like, oh, God.
Well, what people at home don't realise is really that was about sexual tension, all of that, you know, and nothing to do with Trump.
Both of us fancy Trump.
You don't see what happens under the desk. Can I just say one little fun example of what you said? When I was getting cancelled, and it's nothing to the scale of other people, but it was a pretty nasty week. I couldn't sleep for like 3 days or eat. At one point, people were attacking me so badly on Twitter, I came across to my Instagram, which is very small, and someone had gone across to Instagram specifically to attack me. I kind of half fell asleep late at night. Then I got a loud knock on the door, and my first thought was, they've come to my house.
I know it does.
That's how bad it gets.
It does feel very, very strange, you know. But what I've worked out, I've just turned on the quality filter on Twitter, and I'm not getting any insults anymore. I'm a bit disappointed, actually. Anyway, Tuesday's Telegraph next, and this dog, not such a good girl, Josh.
Well, I mean, is it the dog's fault? Is it the women who took him up?
This is Maggie the dog.
Maggie the Turkish Akbash.
Yeah. Let's have a look at Maggie.
Okay,
what does she look like? Oh, I mean, very sweet.
So
lovely dog.
She's 35 kilograms. She's a pretty big dog. They took her up.
Ben Nevis.
Ben Nevis, 4,400 feet, and then halfway down she hurt her paw as well.
Yeah, her paws
the heat and everything.
Yeah, it was
they
hot.
tried to carry her down, so the Loch Aber Mountain Rescue essentially brought up this stretcher to bring her down.
Loch Harbour, apparently.
Loch Harbour, OK.
And they took a stretcher, they rescued the dog.
I have to question the wisdom. 1 in the morning.
I do have to question the wisdom of... Like, climbing Ben Nevis is scary stuff. A friend of mine's done it, and she told me that, like, they were warned as they were going up that people die there all the time. It's really scary. Why would you take a dog for a walk up Ben Nevis, Nick?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just loving the range of our show. It's like America's heading for civil war. Now let's look at a lovely dog.
Well, the dog was rescued, and I think it is a lovely story.
It's a lovely story.
Don't be so cynical, Nick.
Have you seen the video of this dog that refuses to walk? And the owner's trying to pull him along, and the dog just will not move. It's very funny.
Well,
Google.
We're going to move on now. We haven't got much time, so let's go on to the Times now. This is about Freya the walrus.
Yeah, enough of this dog content. Let's get on to the real stuff. Norway puts down Freya the walrus because public wouldn't leave her alone. Absolutely tragic. So basically, she was suffering stress because of the proximity of sightseers. So in the end, had to be killed because people wouldn't leave her alone. It's kind of a metaphor for my life. You know, she had so many fans that she died, but whereas I've only died inside. It's terrible. There's a little interesting bit here. It says Freya was seen chasing a duck and attacking a swan, which I thought was quite amusing. But it's sad because, they wouldn't stop messing around with Freya, and they couldn't guarantee that Freya wouldn't attack them, as she probably would in that scenario. So they had to kill her. And animal activists have been saying people should have been fined instead for going near it.
Well, walruses, my understanding is that walruses don't generally attack people.
Rarely.
And if people were,
so annoying now.
bothering the walrus, why does the walrus get blamed? Why did we put that?
I know the Norwegian Fisheries Ministry warned last week that if people continue to approach the walrus, it would have to be put down. Right.
Yes.
And they continue to do it.
They still did it.
They still did it.
It's like those people that keep coming up to celebrities and keep getting photos even if they obviously hate it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Happens to me all the time.
Yeah. We've got one more story now. This is Nick Daily Star. This is the signs that someone is lying. What's this
Top
about?
signs someone is lying, from eye contact to perfectly still poker face. I don't believe that at all. Josh, you are a good comedian. I'm sorry. I broke the poker face, therefore it wasn't a lie. So there you go. Yeah, it's apparently poker face. Fiddling with chips, presumably that only applies to poker.
They're talking about poker chips, not... Yeah,
yeah, I think so. And and there's just... Basically, people think they can tell if people are lying, but it's not clear if they actually can.
Okay.
Brits admit they tell a lie 4 times a day on average, but these are liars, so it's probably much higher than that.
I mean, this is the thing, Josh. Isn't it just best not to lie? I mean, that would be the...
But I think... But there's that whole thing of, like, white lies and doing...
Oh, I see, like when you're lying to help someone.
yeah, this food is delicious.
I see.
That type, the nice lie. Oh, that's a nice...
Are you talking about my tie?
No,
You said to me earlier this was one of my best ties, Josh.
I did, yes, but it was almost... That was a bit of a diss about the rest.
What is your tell, I wonder? How do I know when you're lying?
I know exactly what my tell is. It's the micro smirk.
Oh,
Yeah,
you do that a lot.
Some people enjoy performing a lie and will feel an inner desire to boast about how clever they're being, fooling people.
Well, I've now learned never to trust Josh Howie. That is all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Josh and Nick. And join me tomorrow. I'm going to be hosting Headliners at 11 p.m, where we will go through the next day's papers as always. See you there. Farewell.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
On Mark Dolan Tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate, and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for big guests, big opinions, and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've become